everyone. My name is Claudia Morales with the Music Division, and today I'm super excited to introduce you to Grammy winner, Japanese pianist, composer, bandleader, Hiromi Awera. Hiromi is known around the world for her electrifying performances, and when I say electrifying, I mean electrifying. Her impeccable piano techniques and her gender-blind approach to music composition. Hiromi, welcome to the Library of Congress. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me here.
So before we sat down to have this little chat, you had the chance to view some items from our music collection. Mm-hmm. The music division has over 25 million items in its collection. And before we sat down here, we had a chance to prepare some private display for Hiromi. Hiromi, what did you see and what reactions do you have to what you saw?
Well, you know, the pieces from Toshiko Akiyoshi in Czech Korea, and a couple of my photos, and the George Gershwin's work. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it's just so inspiring to see, of course, the manuscript, like the paper, the writing, the actual original writing mm-hmm. by them, and I don't know, I just feel so much energy, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What were they thinking, and just imagining all the inspiration they had when they were kind of giving birth to this piece. It was just inspiring.
Mm-hmm. When we were viewing Toshiko's work, I asked you if you have any connection with her work, if she was an inspiration for you when you were growing up. What is your connection with her with your music?
I met her when I was around, I think, 16 years old in Japan, mm-hmm. and I was opening for one of her concerts, mm-hmm. and that was when I first met her. And since then I met her in New York a couple of times, and she's like huge icon, mm-hmm. for all the Japanese jazz musicians who dreams to come to the States mm-hmm. one mm-hmm. day, because she was the very first one who moved here, and not in easy time, mm-hmm. the era that she traveled here. I mean, when she moved here, there was no internet, of mm-hmm. course, phone call was probably like super expensive, flights even, and there was no direct flights from Japan to New York or Boston, where she moved first. And I don't know, I mean, just thinking about all these factors, imagining all of this just makes me realize how tough she was, and how determined she was to just, okay, I'm gonna make it here. Mm-hmm. And that energy is just amazing, mm-hmm. and okay, I'm gonna, whatever happens, I'm just gonna go for it. Mm-hmm. And I always, whenever I encounter some troubles on the road, mm-hmm. or something hard in Korea, I always think of her, and always just, tell myself it's so much easier compared to, what she's been through in that time, and always kind of, encourages me to just go further. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Moving along in the display, we had some material from Czech Korea, mm-hmm. and you met him when you were only 17.
Yes.
And then you worked with her later on in your career. How did you get to know him at such a young age?
I just happened to be in the same building with Chick when in Tokyo. Uh-huh. I was taking lessons from one of the teachers there, and he was rehearsing for his concert in the same building. Uh-huh. So I went to say hello. Uh-huh. And he was very open-hearted person and very friendly, and also a great educator as well. So, I think he just saw me like and okay, but he was asking me questions. What do you play? Play the piano. Do you improvise? Do you compose? What do you play? Like, do you play jazz? And he was asking me all these questions. And then he said, why don't you play something? So because there was a piano. I said, okay. And then I played one of my pieces, and he started to sit next to me, and we started to kind of improvise there. And after we finished playing, he asked me, do you want to play in my show tomorrow? So I was, just shocked, but I was happy at the same time, of course. So I said yes. And he always always surprises me, in that way. That happens when I was 17. Then when I was 26, we met again in Tokyo Jazz Festival, and we played duet together. Then he asked me if I wanted to make an album with him, and we made an album together in 2007. So always a surprise, but happy surprise, I guess.
The duet album, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I love the Humpty Dumpty piece.
Yes, yes.
That's a
Me
crazy
too.
piece.
Yes.
Speaking of pieces, going back to your work, your beginnings, your piece, Tom and Jerry. I love that piece. It's so playful. It's so you. What is the story about that piece?
Well, I'm a big fan of the cartoon, the Tom and Jerry show, and just inspired me to write a piece for it.
But somebody heard that piece. Someone heard that piece at a very important time in your life.
Yeah, when I was in Berkeley, one of my teacher was a good friend of Ahmad, and he played that piece over the phone to Ahmad.
Over the phone, okay.
Yeah, and that's how I met Ahmad, and then he introduced me in this jazz festival in Italy, and I opened a set, for his set, and that was another kind of miraculous story for me.
Was that kind of like, did that mark the beginning of your professional career?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of like your launch into the U.S. market, something like that. Yeah. You came to Berkeley School of Music in your 20s.
Yes.
But prior to that, you already had a career in Japan.
No, really, no.
Not necessarily. No. What made you want to come to Berkeley?
Well, I always, loved jazz music, and I just was curious to travel to the country where the music was born, and so I went to a couple of school, visit, like open campus thing, in a couple of school in New York and Berkeley, and I just really loved that how they see music. Like Berkeley was so open to all kinds of music, and I see from like classical students to rock kids to like jazz students, and because I loved all kinds of music, so I just felt, okay, this is a place for me to the first reason to move to the States.
And how was it for you at the very beginning?
I was wonderful. I loved living in Boston. I still love Boston. Always makes me feel nostalgic whenever I go there. And what I really love about Boston was on the avenue that Berkeley is located at. There's Boston Conservatory, there's New England Conservatory, and they're full of musicians. And almost like everybody you bump into on the street are musicians. And that never happened to me in my life. You know, I'm from a small city called Hamamatsu in Japan, and of course there are musicians, but it's not like that. And everybody you meet on the street are musicians. That at the same time, that made me think that, wow, there are that many musicians in the world, you know. Yeah.
Going back to your beginnings, I heard you say before that you grew up in a supportive environment, that your mom was always supportive of your different choices. How did that upbringing affect the way that you look at music, that you play and write and compose? The reason why I ask is that, to me, your music, as I said before, it feels so playful. It's very live, and many pieces that I hear your music, I can picture you smiling and just it feels like you let yourself go with no judgment, with no expectation to be this or that. And I always wonder if that has something to do with you as a child.
My parents were always so supportive and encouraging for whatever I wanted to do, and they knew that I had my love for piano, so you know they kept supporting me, encouraging me, but they never expected too much, and that was good for me. That they never like pushed me like to be professional, or you know, I never felt any pressure from them. So it was like playing in the playground always. If you want to play, go play, and I just keep running the playground. And that's how I still feel when I'm with the piano. You know, like when you play in the playground, you're not forced to play.
Right.
That's how it should be when you play music, because you love, you know, what you do and you play. But like the second you feel some kind of pressure or being compared, for example, then it's not a playground anymore, right? But I think my parents always kind of kept that, you know, free and open. I could leave whenever I wanted, but I never did because I loved playing in the playground. And that's, yeah, I think that was really important.
Speaking of playing free, you in your album
Spectrum.
Spectrum, yes. So we just view the manuscript of Rhapsody in Blue. And as Ray mentioned, we show that as part of the celebration of Gershwin at 100, your piece. What was the process of doing that arrangement and getting yourself into Rhapsody in Blue and writing Rhapsody in various shades of blue?
Well, you know, I always loved Gershwin's work, and I think the first time I heard was when I was in elementary school, and I started playing his pieces from easy ones, and I think when I was maybe 10 or 11, I first tried to play Rhapsody in Blue solo version, and I was fascinated by the work, and you know, never got bored with it, and I still have fun playing it, you know, after so many years. And because I started to improvise over what was, you know, written on the paper. Then I realized there are so many songs with the name of Blue, you know. So I started to insert like a couple of different blue songs, you know, and I think that's how I, you know, arranged the song, you know, with many different. I mean, that was one version, but there is like a different version. I just always like to put some like different songs into the cadenza section.
And we were talking before that we have the Ira and George Gershwin room here
Yeah.
at the library because we have the collection. And in there, we have George Gershwin piano. And I was wondering if you would like to play it for a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to play it?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, yeah.
She wants to play it. So let's go. So there was a little surprise that you didn't know, and she didn't know either. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you, Hiromi. How was it? How was the piano?
Wow, it's I felt inspired.
Yeah?
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah? That's wonderful.
I just try to play with try to tell him how thankful and grateful I am for all of his work that he's given us. Yeah.
I'm sure that he felt it. He felt the love.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And for the ones watching from home, see you next time.